I don't know if the viewers are clear right now on what we know about the action, the plan to kill, to pay bounties to al-Qaeda-affiliated militants to kill American troops, as separate from what the president knew. So first of all, do we know that this was a real thing?
You know, Ali, the intelligence assessment by the United States government it suggests that this is a real thing. We're still trying to gather more information publicly about the circumstances. There's been some investigative work to try to piece together the financial transactions and some of the other things that occurred. But it appears to be real at this hour. But again, there are those in the White House who are contesting whether this is actually corroborated. But you're right to point out that that's separate from the issue of whether the president was told about this by the intelligence community. The reporting over the last few days is that he actually was told in the presidential daily brief that this information was provided in that brief back in February of this year. The president, as we have long known, does not read the presidential daily brief with any regularity. He chooses to only consume the intelligence that's presented to him orally or through pictures or videos or graphics, but he doesn't read that long document as most past presidents have. And that may be the explanation for why he claims he wasn't briefed on it, even though it was contained in the PDD.
Although, Julia, this is interesting because the line that is coming out of the administration didn't rise to the level. It sort of fudges the issue here, right? So in other words, if it was happening and someone knew about it, somehow someone didn't, according to the president, alert him to a level that suggested something needed to be done about this. Now, the National Security Advisor's comments seem different. He seemed to imply that the national security establishment, the intelligence establishment, were actually working up different scenarios in case it turned out to be true. So somewhere there is a serious disconnect in either the intelligence or the national security infrastructure or the way information gets to the president.
You know, I just want to take you back to the president's words that you just showed, where he misspoke and said it didn't rise to the occasion. And I think, frankly, the president is not rising to the occasion as commander in chief. I mean, this discussion is really, I mean, it's very Washington in that, you know, who knew what when and what was in the, like, was it in the written briefing? Was it in the oral briefing? It is important, but ultimately the fact that we're even having this discussion, what kind of commander in chief falls back on, didn't know, nobody told me. It was this, you know, it was the briefer's fault. It wasn't my fault. I didn't know. I just, again, to echo the president, he doesn't rise to the occasion. It's just a lame excuse.
Yeah, I think, Ron, let's answer Julia's question when you say what kind of person, because really the response of any President Trump likes to think of himself as a chief executive. The responsible of any executive, anybody in charge of something, when they hear that something of that magnitude might be taking place, is to get on it, is to say, wow, if this is true, we're going to take necessary action. The response of President Trump is just unusual. Didn't know, nobody told me, not treating it with the importance. I mean, the thing I think most Americans want to know, and most parents of servicemen and women, and most people who serve in the United States forces want to know is, have you got our back?
Yeah, you know, Ali, just to build on what Julia said, I think in some ways the most iconic moment of the Trump administration maybe that moment in the Rose Garden when he was asked about the COVID response, and he said, I take no responsibility. Because that has been his approach to all these problems and all the challenges of the presidency. He just takes no responsibility for anything. He takes no responsibility for this crisis we're facing with COVID, and no responsibility for dealing with and responding to this information about the Russians potentially put a bounty on American lives, people who are serving our country. Look, the president should read his daily brief. OK, I worked for President Biden, President Obama, Vice President Biden. They read the brief every day. OK, even if Trump didn't read it, he should have been told about it. And the fact he wasn't told about it speaks to how his staff thinks about the president, either too close to Russia or too incompetent to deal with it. And even if you lay all that aside, by the time this became public last week, he should have been on the phone with Vladimir Putin, demanding answers, demanding action, talking about sanctions against Russia. The worst part of this all is still to this day, he is basically blowing off this threat to the men and women who serve our country overseas.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.